Okay, I think we're going to get started. Almost everybody is here who said they were going to be coming. So, welcome, folks. So glad to see you all. Lots of folks that I haven't seen in quite some time, so I'm really happy to be able to have this in person. So, I'm Suzette Snow-Cobb, and I have been I've been working for NFCA now for, I think this is 6 years, and a number of years before that for Franklin Community Co-op, and very happy to have that be my sort of hometown, one of my hometown co-ops. We are looking forward to our day together, our first in-person gathering in 3 years, and we're happy to be able to have it here at GCC. We had a number of our past gatherings here. And we've got a great day, our agenda, and you also have, of course, when you checked in, you have the agenda on a paper. Let's see, we've got speakers, awards, and lunch, of course, and then we want to wrap up by 3 o'clock. And Justin, who you've already perhaps seen around with the camera, he is also responsible for our fantastic graphic design. So he does work for NFCA doing graphic work, and his own business too, in case you have other work you might need. Let's see, Elias Crowell. Elias hasn't arrived yet, but I want to thank him. You'll perhaps recognize him. He looks a little like Erbin. And his mom, Kristen, too. But he helped with putting together the setup for today, all the glasses, and we also had help, of course, set up today from our board members. But so there are 10-year anniversary glasses, which we didn't get to do on our 10-year anniversary. So we brought them today for you to each take home one. Okay. So we are excited to be able to welcome our members. We had really great representation. Our food co-ops from across the region. We hope you'll take the opportunity to connect with your other neighboring co-ops. We've built in a few places throughout the day to be able to do that and connect up. Perhaps meet some folks that you haven't seen for the first time, and also some other partners and former board members and guests. And when you all registered, we asked a question about which co-op principle you think could be the most relevant to communicating the co-op difference. So you all, over 50% of you chose, can you guess which one? Concern for community. So overwhelmingly concern for community. But as we all know, all of the co-op principles are extremely important, but we're glad to be able to have our food co-op community here and be able to share with each other today. There we go. So we're also very happy and excited to welcome 2 of our startups, Assabet Co-op Market and Dorchester Food Co-op. They're both planning to open their stores this year, which is very exciting. We're also want to welcome Faye Mack, Executive Director of Food Co-op Initiative. Did we see Faye yet? Not yet. Well, maybe she'll be here. Faye is also a former NFCA board president, so we're happy to have her joining us today too.
First, I just want to welcome you all. It's so great to be together in person again after these few years. It's been our honor to work with you all and support you and be supported by you. Last few years have been really challenging, but it's also been really inspiring to see all the work that you've been doing, the challenges that you've overcome, And for us, the work of our partners has been really crucial as well. And I just wanted to take a second to recognize the organizations that support us, not just for this annual meeting, but also year-round, some of whom are here. Brian Cavey and his daughter Tina. Brian's with CoBank, which has been a major support of ours over the years. Clay Whitney I saw come in from Cabot. Cabot's been a huge collaborator, particularly in promoting the cooperative economy. We have Rebecca and Mika from Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. It's a long list, but I'm going to do the list. Damon Ralph from NCB is here. David Fowle from NCG. Roger Noonan I saw come in from New England Farmers Union. Aaron Chase from ECRS. Kathy Statz, who's representing St. Mary's University. And a little later, we'll also have folks here at lunch from Artisan Beverage Cooperative and Real Pickles Co-op sampling some products for lunch. So thank you all so much for your support and for being here. And with that, I would like to introduce our illustrious president, Sue Miller, to share some comments. Thank you, Sue.
I want you to know that I own more than this jacket. It seems like every picture that I see of myself or NFCA, I have this jacket on. I do have more. Thank you, Erbin. What a treat to be here today, to actually see people in person. I've seen so many of you on Zoom meetings over the last 3 years that it's actually great to be in the same room with everybody. Our co-ops have faced some real challenges in the past few years, but we've also seen how valuable our co-ops are to our communities and the importance of all of our relationships together as we've sustained good jobs, we've sustained good markets for our local producers, and we've provided opportunities for our communities to create solutions through cooperation. So the theme for today's gathering, Rebuilding Connections and Celebrating Cooperation, reflects our desire, our common desire, to rekindle our human connections. As always, I want to share, and this statement doesn't even begin to cover it, but I want to share my appreciation for the executive director and the staff. Please, yeah. They do so much for the organization and for our co-ops in general. As you saw from our annual report, they continued throughout the last 3 years of the pandemic to support our co-ops. They have provided tremendous opportunities for connections and collaboration and expanded our impact at a very critical time for all of our co-ops. And in the process, we've had another successful year, turning a budget loss into a small surplus. Who can't be excited about that? We are particularly thankful for their resilience, their flexibility, and their commitment during such an unsteady time. It's also been one of my great joys to work with this board, and I'm always appreciative of this group of folks. Such an amazing group of folks. I've made such good friends being a part of the board. Their contributions, their collaboration, their attention to joint success. So I would like to ask the directors to stand. I know they're not a shy group, so can you guys, nice. These folks have so much knowledge and so much enthusiasm and excitement for co-ops. Please reach out to them during the day. I'm sure there's some nugget of wisdom that they're more than happy to share with you. So today, I'm stepping down from my connection with the NFCA board, which is much more than a little sad for me. I have enjoyed my time. I've felt supported as a GM
by my time on the board. It's the best organization that I have ever had the great honor to be part of. At the same time, I'm really excited because I'm really proud of all the work that NFCA has done so far and all the great things that I know are to come as we continue to grow and evolve and achieve our mission for the future. So I want to thank you, all of our member co-ops, for the opportunity to having been a part of this amazing work. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned, today is about rebuilding connections. We really wanted to have as much time as possible to connect and build relationships. It was so great as I was watching people come in already. You were like getting together and saying hi and sharing some thoughts. So that's great. Let's spend the rest of the time today taking all of those opportunities that we can. As you see from the agenda, we've tried to provide a variety of opportunities for dialogue, but also ample time for just being together, networking, and getting to know each other again, or maybe even for the first time. We do have a couple of speakers today to help us kick off the day, and I'm looking forward to hearing from both of them, as I'm betting you are too. So as some of you might remember, Congressman McGovern was to be our keynote speaker back in 2020, when seemingly out of nowhere, something called COVID-19 caused us to cancel our annual meeting. So we're very thankful that Congressman McGovern agreed to come back today for a second try, and we actually made it. No snow, no freezing rain, no nothing. So since 2002, Mr. McGovern has worked tirelessly for our communities as they have faced the ongoing challenges of the pandemic. A longtime advocate for justice, food security, and an economy that works for everyone, Congressman McGovern represents the 2nd District of Massachusetts, which includes a good number of our member co-ops, as well as other cooperatives represented here today. We are particularly excited to have him as a member of NCBA CLUS's Congressional Cooperative Business Caucus. Congressman McGovern was first elected to Congress in 1996 and currently serves as a senior member of the Committee on Agriculture's Subcommittee on Nutrition and Oversight, and is the ranking member of the House Committee on Rules. With the Farm Bill negotiations, which we all know are on the horizon, we're particularly looking forward to his comments on the role and potential of our food co-ops in helping to build a more just, sustainable, and inclusive food system and economy. So please join me in welcoming Congressman Jim McGovern.
Well, first of all, let me thank Sue Miller for the generous introduction. I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say after that build-up. But I also want to join, I know, with all of you in thanking her for her incredible leadership. So it's great to be here. And thank you for inviting me back. I mean, the last time you invited me, we had a pandemic. I mean, and you invited me again, and luckily there's no plague. So I hope I'm not bringing you bad luck. I also want to acknowledge Cornelius Blanding, who you're going to hear from in a little while, and thank him for all the great work that he does. I too want to join in congratulating all the partners who support your efforts here today. And just on a point of personal privilege, one in particular I want to mention that's very personal to me, my friends at CoBank and Brian Cavey. I want to thank you. We were just talking. Some of you may know that I do a lot of work on hunger and food insecurity, and every year I join this march from Springfield to Greenfield, 43 miles, to raise awareness about hunger and to raise money for the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. And many years ago, an employee at CoBank, this wonderful woman, Sarah Tyree, said, we will help you out. And every year, CoBank has been a very generous supporter of that march and of the food bank. And I've always been impressed by that because they don't have to, and they do it. Unfortunately, Sarah passed away from cancer, but the generosity continues. And I was just saying to Brian, we got to end hunger because I'm getting too goddamn old to walk 43 miles. But the bottom line is I All of the partners up here, I'm recognizing their names, have all given generously to so many important causes, not just to the cause that we're talking about here today. Look, food co-ops are near and dear to my heart. Every spring, I do my office hours and my community meetings, and I used to do them in food co-ops, Greenfield's Market here in Greenfield. Used to do my office hours there all the time. They got too big and unruly, and people started getting miffed that I was occupying all the tables and they couldn't have their sandwiches, and then people would come who didn't really appreciate me very much. I realized I wasn't universally loved, and so I have some of my best fights in co-ops. But nonetheless, River Valley Cooperative in Northampton is another great place, and I love seeing them expand to a new location in East Hampton, even though that's not my district, but we're happy to see that. Quab and Harvest in Orange has been a place that I've spent an awful lot of time. And look, co-ops are engines of economic opportunity, and they're engines for mobility and revival in our communities. And I am so thrilled to be from a part of the country where we value co-ops and embrace their mission and their vision. Every time I go to a food co-op, I am impressed by how passionate all the people there are. I mean, amazing selections, focus on health, but focus on individuals that are coming into the market. Some people pretty well off, some people struggling, but everybody welcome. And those are the kind of values that we need to replicate even more all throughout not only Massachusetts and New England, but the country. Look, the cooperative model is special. Co-ops are gathering spaces, forums, and community builders. There are places where thinking globally and acting locally is a mission, not just a catchphrase. And co-ops give people choices and access to fresh, local food. They give our producers opportunities that they may not have in traditional retail. Our farmers love our co-ops. They're places to build a more inclusive economy. They empower people, whether producers or consumers, to participate in the community and engage with their neighbors. They're also democratic spaces, small d. The member-owned model empowers people to have a say in meeting the needs of the community. And you really do understand what the needs of the community are, and one glove doesn't fit all. Bringing more people into the system benefits everyone, which is an incredible way to spur economic development. So look, co-ops aren't just great for communities they serve. I honestly believe that the co-op model is good for the country. They build more resilient food systems. At the beginning of COVID, our food system fell apart. I mean, hunger skyrocketed. Food rotted in fields, and grocery shelves were empty. Food pantries couldn't keep up. Co-ops stepped up with local producers and community partners, and going local was the way to go. Co-ops fight hunger. A major component of food security is making sure that nutritious, affordable, and accessible food is available to people where they are. Co-ops are instrumental in making that real. The co-op model is a gateway to greater participation in civil society. Food is political, and the public choices we make have an impact on whether we have a food system built on dignity for everyone involved or not. So with that in mind, this year we're headed into a farm bill in Congress. And if you haven't heard of the Farm Bill, this is one of those major pieces of legislation that we have to pass every 5 years. It's the #1 agricultural and food policy instrument of the federal government. So it is important to all of us. And it is important that we are engaged like never before. I get on the Agriculture Committee when my district primarily was urban and suburban. And I got on it because that's where a lot of our food and nutrition programs are. That's where the SNAP program is authorized. And then as the state legislature, maybe with a sense of humor, decided to redistrict me out here, I inherited more and more farms. I now have a district with over 2,000 farms in it. and a growing number of food co-ops. And so it's even better for me to be on the Agriculture Committee with all of the new areas that I represent. But my priority has always been about ending hunger in this country, and food insecurity, and nutrition insecurity. You know, I'm somebody who believes that food ought to be a fundamental human right for every single person in this country, and that we live in the greatest, the richest, the most powerful country in the world, and 35 million, at last count, 35 million of our fellow citizens don't even know where their next meal is going to come from. And in addition to that, millions and millions of people live in areas where they don't have access to locally grown foods or fresh fruits and vegetables. They live in what I call food apartheids. I don't call them deserts, because the deserts are natural. Apartheids are man-made. And we need to make sure that everybody in this country has access to this incredible, you know, wonderful produce that that come out from our local farms. I am defending the SNAP program and other nutrition programs from potential cuts, which some of my colleagues who are now in leadership in the House are talking about going after. In fact, you may know, because I know a lot of you, take SNAP benefits at your food co-ops. People here in Massachusetts and all over the country are now seeing a decrease in their benefits. The pandemic bump up is ending. And here in Massachusetts, the governor is trying to pass an emergency supplemental to help ease the cliff, if you will, of those funds being terminated. But people are going to see less. And by the way, the average SNAP benefit, with all of the add-ons because of COVID, was about $2.45 per person per meal. I mean, you can barely buy a cup of coffee for that, right? It's going to go down to $2. And some of my colleagues want to cut it down even lower. Maybe before President Biden became president, it was about $1.40 per person per meal on average. I mean, really? I mean, we have endless amounts of money to build weapon systems that are obsolete, that we will never use. But when it comes to making sure that everybody in this country has enough to eat and adequate nutritious food, all of a sudden we're nickel and diming it. We got to stop that. Because, by the way, if people are hungry and if they don't have access to the kind of food that you provide people, you know what? There's a cost to that. There's a health cost to that, avoidable health care costs. There are workers who go to work hungry are less productive. Kids who go to school hungry do not learn. So there is a cost to that. So food co-ops are essential in ending hunger in America. And one of the things we need to talk about in this farm bill is how we expand here in Massachusetts, we call the HIP program, how we expand it beyond farmers markets and CSAs to include all of you and even beyond. I mean, no matter where you go to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, you ought to be able to get a bigger bang for your SNAP dollar. And that is something that we should be talking about in this farm bill. We need to find ways to make food more accessible in our communities. We need to support our local farmers. So the advocacy that I think many of the people in this room, need to put forward also has to reflect what our local farmers, our small and medium-sized farmers need, what can help them not just survive, but to help them survive. So more than that, the cooperative model, I think, is a blueprint for a more just, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable food system. That it's a structural model that I think we need to build on. So I'll just close, because I know we want to have a dialogue here, by saying, look, we need to be involved, right? We need advocacy. We need people to pay attention, to be plugged in. And sometimes it's advocacy for something. Sometimes it's advocacy to prevent something bad from happening. Change really does come from the grassroots. If the grassroots are not involved, then the change that happens comes from the people with money. As somebody who, again, is kind of new to the agricultural sector in terms of where my focus and expertise is, I was shocked when I first got on the Agriculture Committee several years ago to see that it really was more reflective of a corporate model than of a, you know, of the farmers that I represent, of the interests that I represent. You know, so if we are not raising our voices, if we are not engaged, then it's the money that is going to direct the policy. And quite frankly, they're not interested in the same things that people in this room are interested in. And so I look forward to working with you. I don't have all the answers. I need to learn from you. This Farm Bill is coming up. We don't have a draft. It is being written in the next few months. And here's the deal. If it's a bill that reflects our values, we should all come together and support it. If it's a bill that betrays our values, we need to fight like hell to defeat it and wait for a moment when we could actually have a bill that, quite frankly, our communities and our country deserves. So let me end there, and I'm happy to open this up to comments, questions.
So who has a question? I've got a roving mic.
Just don't throw the mic.
No throwing. Okay. All right, Allan.
Thank you very much. Representative McGovern, really appreciate you taking the time. We actually had the opportunity to meet briefly at the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, and your staff was very instrumental in helping us dive into the WIC issue and the ability of small co-ops to be certified in their states as WIC retailers. We're making great progress on that. So here is a policy question for you. We certainly understand that the nickel and dimers are out there to claw back important progress on SNAP. What is the key argument we need to push back on? I mean, our story of hunger and cooperative values is a national story. It's not just the small farms. But is there a key argument on their efforts to claw back on the SNAP funding that we collectively can focus in on?
Yeah, so what seems to be emerging now is a narrative that doesn't reflect reality. I mean, you know the people who come into your operations who are on SNAP, and there's a narrative out there. It's the old narrative. It gets dusted off every once in a while, that people on SNAP are lazy, that they don't work, that they're on it forever and ever and ever. And you know, and quite frankly, it's an argument that plays well to the cheap seats, depending on who you're talking to. You know, because what the critics like to say is that you're being ripped off, that there are people who are taking advantage of you, you know, people who are not on SNAP, and it's just not the case. And I think we just need to be armed with the facts, right? The majority of people who are on SNAP, who benefit from SNAP, are children, right? Now, if you want to open up the workhouses again and force kids into child labor, well, we'll have that debate. Then the second biggest group are senior citizens. And then of the group that they often like to target, which is working people, people who are able-bodied, who can work, the majority of people who are on the benefit, who can work, actually work. So the issue is, these people are doing everything, what everybody expects them to do, right? They're working. And they still earn so little they qualify for the benefit. So to try to reduce their benefit or to put more hurdles in place, and then they go after this population called the able-bodied adults without dependents population, because they must be really lazy. And the reality is, when you examine who that population is, it includes veterans. It includes people who are suffering with undiagnosed mental illness. It includes young people just graduating out of foster care. There are really stringent work requirements in the program already that are too stringent. So if you're an able-bodied adult without dependent right now, you can get on the benefit for 3 months. And if you are not working, or if you're not in a work training program, you are off the benefit for 3 years. Now you tell me how that helps that person get a job or be able to get ahead or to do anything. So we have to explain the reality. And I'm going to tell you, we have to be better storytellers. Because, you know, in Congress, we are inundated with facts and figures and statistics and numbers and graphs. And there's a useful place for those things. But I think sometimes we're so inundated with all this stuff that we've lost our human ability to feel what they mean. And so sometimes, telling stories, people you have dealt with, this program is incredibly important. It's about food. It's not about you can save it and, buy a flat screen TV. It's food. That is all this is. And it's a benefit that is inadequate even with all the add-ons, right? But to cut it or to make it more difficult or to humiliate people who are on the program really, I think, betrays our values. And so I think that is the deal. The other argument, too, is that it is an economic stimulus. For every SNAP dollar we spend, we get much, much more in return. So this is a win-win-win. And our farmers like it, right? Who produces the food? Our farmers. So I think we have to toughen up, and we have to be ready to take people on this. My patience, my filter has gone, right? I mean, when people start, going down this road of, people on it forever, the average time that someone's on this program, is about a year or a little bit longer at most. So it's not, I'm on it for the rest of my life. But I will tell you, I go to, I visited one of my emergency rooms in Worcester, one of my hospitals, a couple of weeks ago, and I was told that we have senior citizens showing up in the emergency room because they're taking their prescriptions on an empty stomach because they can't afford their food, their rent, their heating bill. I mean, this is the United States of America. I mean, let's be the first country in the world to make ending hunger, a reality. And you mentioned the White House conference that we had on nutrition, health, and hunger. That was the first conference on this topic in 50 years. Last time was when Richard Nixon was president. And my last name is McGovern. I'm not supposed to, but anyway, Nixon was president. But anyway, but they did this conference, and out of that conference came WIC. Came, labeling on food so people can make decisions on whether or not they're buying decent food. Came the modern day SNAP program, right? A lot of good things. This conference has the potential to be as transformational. Joe Biden, whether you like him or not, was the first president that I can recall in my lifetime who has said that ending hunger and diet-related diseases is a national priority, and that we will end hunger in this country by 2030 as a national goal. I mean, the fact that a president said that is huge. And as we speak, there are all kinds of things happening. And so we look forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Hi, my
Hi.
name's Amanda, and I'm the board president at the Middlebury Natural Foods Co-op in Vermont. And I wrote down something you said that I found really compelling. You said that food co-ops are a blueprint for a more just food system. And I was wondering if you could just kind of expand on that idea a little bit, because as board president, I'm always thinking about how to communicate why the co-op model is different and why it matters, and encourage people to become member owners of our co-op. And I would love to hear your perspective. I mean, you just spoke a little bit about that community model and knowing where our food comes from and knowing if our member owners are okay. But yeah, we have people who still just kind of shop and say, oh, it's sort of like, it's kind of cute that it's a co-op. They don't really get the difference. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I'm a believer that we ought to have a 50-state farm policy, right? I mean, I think it's a national security issue, too, as well as a health and well-being issue. And when I first got elected 100 years ago, my district was very different. It went from Princeton, Massachusetts to Dartmouth. We called it the Ivy League district, all right, but there's no Ivy League schools in it. But anyway, but I invited then Secretary of Agriculture Dan Glickman, this was during the Clinton administration, to come to visit some local farms in Dartmouth, which was the southern part of my district. And I remember he kind of joked with me. He says, I didn't know there were farms in Massachusetts. And I said, not only are there farms in Massachusetts, but there are farms in Massachusetts when you look at how many generations they've been in that are older than most of the other farms in the country, including those in your state of Kansas. And it made me real. And he when after his tour, he kind of said to me, "Yeah, no, I get it, but what we want to make sure continues to happen is that you know, and this is where food co-ops come in, is you know where everything comes from. And you make a conscious effort to support the community. But in any event, but I look at it the same way with food co-ops, right? I mean, it's like you want to make sure that our local farms survive. And in doing so, you are committing, you know, not only to helping these local farms and growing fresh, healthy food for people, but you're also making a commitment to the environment. Because if that farm goes out of business and it's not protected land, it gets bought up and it's turned into whatever. So I look at co-ops as the model because it's supporting our local community. It doesn't mean we don't care about what happens outside our local community, but if we're not doing well locally, if we don't have food sources locally, then we open ourselves up to some of the things that we saw during the pandemic, food shortages, you know, supply chain issues. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So that's what when I think of you as a model, I mean, it's like, you know, the people I see every day are benefiting from your existence. And that's a good, I think that's a good model. It's a good feeling, I think, at least from my perspective.
So thank you all. Before we get to a break and lunch, we have one more great conversation to have here. This is an honor for me. For many of you who've gathered with us over the years, this friend of ours needs no introduction. That's because Cornelius and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives have been a key part of our work, our time together, our dialogues for years now. If you recall back in 2017, Cornelius was our keynote and shared with us the message of what if. And if you know Cornelius, he likes to answer his own questions. So he said, what if? He said, what if the residents of our communities truly owned the economic base and infrastructure of their own communities? And he said, what if is a reality? What if is cooperatives? Now, there was a lot more that followed that was awesome. And we invited Cornelius back again in 2021 to celebrate our 10 years. And a big part of that conversation was not just hearing from many of you who were part of the start of the NFCA, but also folks like Cornelius who have really been helping us look forward and think about the impacts that we can have in the future. And in later that year, we actually worked together to write up an agreement on collaboration between our associations, focused on our shared commitment to the cooperative values and principles, to food security and sustainable agriculture, racial and economic justice, and civil rights and political democracy. Now that's a haul. And I think Cornelius and I have often joked, this isn't something we're doing in 2021. This is a project, it's a process, it's a commitment to each other to be in this work over the long haul, not to see it as something that we make a big deal out of one year and then move to our next topic. It's part of our commitment to each other. And for almost a decade, I've had the honor of serving with Cornelius on the board of the National Cooperative Business Association. And it's really my honor to count him as one of my really good friends and colleagues and supports over the years. And so today, it's my real honor to reintroduce you to Cornelius as the recipient of our Neighboring Cooperator Award for this year. So Cornelius, if you could join us. You can take this home, but first you got to get a picture. You want me to hold it? Yes, you want to hold it?
No, give me my ball. Might not get it back. Well, thank you. I wish Congressman McGovern was still here. I wanted to thank him for taking up some of this time that I had. I saw I had 20 minutes, and I said, well, damn, that's a lot of time to say thank you. So you got me under false pretenses, Erbin. I was only planning to just come up and say thank you, but I saw I had 20 minutes, so I said, well, there's something else that I'm expected to say, obviously. But again, it was a pleasure hearing from Congressman McGovern. I wish he was still here so I could thank him. for his 26 years of service. I saw that he's been in Congress representing this state for 26 years. And that's the amount of time I've been with the Federation. So I really want to say thank you to him for that. But also, as you mentioned, Erbin, I'm on the board of NCBA, the National Co-op Business Association, and the Co-op Business Caucus. And Congressman McGovern is one part of that Co-op Business Caucus. It's extremely important to have folks like the Congressman represent that caucus and taking our word to Congress, having these conversations around the Farm Bill and other legislation. So would like to say thank him for that. But also for his words here today. That was extremely valuable, at least for me. I come from another part of the country where those things that he said aren't true. And he talked about how we ought to be in community. And I think we're a living example of how your work, this work that we do together, matters. There are no good co-op laws in the South. We don't have as many, and because of that, we don't have as many food co-ops in the South. And I think you should really realize the value of this association and the work that you all do together, because it may seem common to you, but it's not common in other parts of the world, especially where I'm from. And so you've always been a model for us, a model for me. I've been glad to be here every time I come. I also get a chance to see some snow when I'm here. And so I was here right before the pandemic. I got a chance to speak via Zoom during the pandemic, and I'm glad this is the first time you've come back after the pandemic, and so I'm glad to be here also during this time. Congressman McGovern talked about his walk to end hunger, 40 miles, and I can sympathize with that because I do a walk not far from here every year in Hingham, Massachusetts, during Sharing Inc., and it's for ending poverty in the South. But we only walk 20 miles, so I wanted to ask the Congressman how in the hell he walks 40 miles. So, but look, let me say thank you. Thank you for this award. I might eat out of it tonight. Thank you for the recognition. It really means a lot. It actually means a whole lot more than you know, because it represents cooperation in terms of what you are here for, what this association is about, but cooperation. So it means a lot, and it means more than other awards mean, because it comes from you. It comes from your colleagues. It comes from your peers, from the folks you work with, and that you're in battle with every day. And so it means a whole lot more than most things. So really know that it means more than you really know. And so I accept this award. I accept it. But I accept it knowing that this isn't about me at all, because it's not about what I've done, because I've done very little. I've done this in cooperation. I've done the work in cooperation, Erbin, with you and your staff, with many of my staff who's been assigned to do a lot of the things, with you all as an organization. But I accept it. I accept it on behalf of our membership of black farmers, landowners, and cooperatives all around the South. I accept it on behalf of my board of directors and on behalf of the staff of the Federation who do a lot of this work, in collaboration with you and a whole lot of others. But also because of this collaboration, because of this cooperation. And so let me express my gratitude for this by talking about our work together. So if you're not familiar with the work that we've been doing together, let me just say thank you by talking a little bit about some of the work that we do together. Erbin mentioned an MOU that we signed a couple of years ago, I think in 2001. And that MOU was about a number of things, but one of them was about mutually and beneficial trade. And that's important to us as an organization. It cuts at the heart of some of the things that the Congressman said up here, because you may see it as food and food coming out your co-ops and dealing with consumers, but that food is coming from somewhere. And in our case, from small farmers, from limited resource farmers, who sometimes don't have access to credit or access to markets. And so those partners that you saw on the screen help play a critical role in that. I'm sitting at the table with Brian, and CoBank has been a critical partner, not only in this work with you, but in work with us as well to try to cut those gaps and make these linkages. NCB, another bank who's been an access for credit for us in a number of ways. But that's a huge challenge in the world where I operate with small farmers, and especially with small black farmers, and access to markets. And so you've played a critical role in that, and just understanding and identifying that as an issue. And so mutually beneficial trade, mutually beneficial trade is what it's been about, because all farmers can get access to markets, but many times those markets are the same things that drive them out of business because of the high cost that they have of producing the crops and the low prices that they get for it. And so this relationship has been extremely beneficial. It's been mutual. And so I want to make sure you understand how important this MOU, this relationship, this collaboration is. And this award is about that for me, for us. But also the MOU is about cooperative education. We're working with folks like St. Mary's to do things like develop a co-op curriculum. Again, in the South, we don't have good co-op laws. Folks don't understand co-ops as much as you do. It's a normal practice, it seems, for you all. 40 plus food co-ops working together. That's amazing. We're 75 co-ops in the South who work together, but they're farmer co-ops, producer co-ops, they're consumer co-ops, they're producer co-ops, and et cetera, and consumer co-ops. It's a mix of co-ops all working together for one common cause, just like you all working together, and it's a pleasure to have cooperation among cooperatives, our cooperatives working with your co-ops, again, for mutually beneficial trade, but also for the educational component. How do we link with the universities, with the colleges in our area to make sure that our young folks are coming up learning about cooperatives, no different than I think those interns, if they've made it here yet, no. So we're looking to do things like that. And so I think you serve as a model for many folks, including us around this country. It's also about co-op development for us. How do we continue to build co-ops and develop co-ops so that not only your food co-ops can work together and people can buy together, but also how do small farmers, small producers aggregate their produce so that they can supply a market like you are. And those are the things that we're talking about doing together. But also, how do we start looking at this model and build food co-ops in the South? Again, there are not many. And the few that we have worked with, they've had to incorporate here in places like Maine and other places in the Northeast because they can't get this kind of charter in the South. So it's extremely important. And last but not least, we've been talking about advocacy together. A lot of the conversations that Congressman McGovern had up here was about the Farm Bill, was about legislation and other things. And those are the things that we've started talking about together, you all as an association and our federation. And this is extremely important to us. And again, is why this award is so important, because it highlights this cooperation. I think a year ago you had one of our staff, one of my colleagues, Daniel Davey, talking to you about some of the issues that were going on at that time and still going on for us. And it was about not only access to credit, but it was about debt relief for farmers of color, especially black farmers, that they were being denied because we as a country were split on the issue, because so many times we're divided and we think that if we give credit or we give debt relief to black farmers, it harms white farmers or other farmers. And we have to get beyond that if we're truly going to build a food system and what we all strive for in terms of the cooperative model. And so again, I really appreciate the work that we do together, and it means more than you know. We've had limited trade over the years in terms of things that we've done. And so I say I thank you for that. But more importantly, I thank you for what we're going to do, what we're always talking and striving for. And that's what's important to us, because it takes longer, as you said, Erbin, it takes longer than a year to get there. But we're always striving for it. We're working jointly on it. We're working jointly on developing materials and co-op curriculums that not only benefit us as an organization, but benefit our membership, benefit our communities. And you'll be surprised how young folks come along when they start getting the opportunity to have these kind of conversations. And again, we're having these discussions about how do we start creating some food co-ops, some startups in our area in the South. And those things are exciting to me. But last but not least, because again, I'm very mindful of time, I really appreciate the fact that you all, as an association, as food co-ops, stood with us in our advocacy efforts around heirs property, around debt relief and other things. The Congressman talked about it in terms of how it's important about farmland protection and land access in this region. For us in the South and in Black communities, it's around heirs property. So it's a different conversation, but it's actually the same thing. It's about land access. It's about farmland protection and how do we protect the farmland? Because we do know that when it goes out of hands of farmers, whether they're Black, white, Hispanic, or whatever color, it normally doesn't stay in agriculture. And if it doesn't stay in agriculture, it impacts all of us, and especially you as food co-ops. So this means a lot. I really say thank you for this award today. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the collaboration. It means more than you know. It's about cooperation. And again, thank you.